Hey there, picked up a Canon R3. I'm really excited. You're probably wondering why I did that. So in this video, I'll want to talk about why I picked up an R3, give you my first impressions because I just got it, and show you a bunch of sample footage. So you know what, let's do the footage first, and then we'll talk about it. So hopefully you enjoyed that and looked decent. I did get this camera yesterday, took it out for just a little bit, but I was really impressed with what I saw in terms of image quality, so I'm really excited about it. And I'm not really surprised. This is Canon's flagship mirrorless camera, and it's very expensive. So as I said, let me talk about why I picked up this camera. I've been wanting to pick up another full-frame Canon camera to go along with my R7. I was really thinking about picking up the R5 again. I was very familiar with the camera. I know exactly what it can do, and now that it doesn't overheat and all that stuff. And then I found a really good deal on a used R3. So you know what? I figured let's pick up the R3. It'll be fun. It'll be different. And I've been really intrigued with this camera since it got released the end of 2021. It has a lot of crazy video specs. It is a wildlife and sports photography camera, high speed, all the benefits you get out of that if you're shooting high action stuff, but it does have crazy video specs. And I could never really consider this camera because of the $6,000 price being new, because I think for most people a C70 is going to be a much better video camera than the R3 is going to be if you're just doing video. But as I said, I've always been intrigued by this camera, and I think it'll be fun to use for a bunch of random stuff. But one of the big things is that I've been doing more wildlife videography, which hopefully you've seen some of the other stuff I've been talking about on this channel. And I was shooting on the Sony 200-600 with the A7S III, got some great footage, and I made a video with that, which I'll leave a link down below if you haven't checked that out. And I'll probably make a separate video about my decision by not wanting to go that route and going with this route instead. But one of the big things is this lens here. This is the RF 100-500, which is what I was filming all that wildlife stuff on. And the big benefits of that lens is it's way smaller and lighter, and the stabilization with the IBIS in the Canon cameras is absolutely incredible. All that was filmed handheld, so I'm using a tripod right now, which I'm filming this on, but all the wildlife stuff, I don't even need to use a tripod. I can stabilize it with Final Cut. So I also have the RF 15-35, which is what I'm filming on right now, so that's one of my favorite lenses ever made, and it works unbelievable on the R3. So really excited to do some more wildlife stuff, and all of that was shot in the 4K and 24 and 60 frames a second in UHD and IPB. There's some crazy video specs in this camera, so I do want to play with the 6K RAW. You can shoot up to 60 frames a second in 6K RAW, and the 4K is oversampled up to 60 frames a second. So really, really nice image, and I'm really curious about dynamic range and all that stuff. So I'll get into that as I use the camera more, but I just want to get it out, talk to you a little bit about why I got it, and start shooting some wildlife. All right, so I'm going to try to shoot a little bit more before I go home. I did hear, just before I hit record, a kingfisher fly over, so I'll see if I can find him and I'll show you some other stuff. All right, so I'm back home, and I just finished editing up the footage that you just watched, and as expected, I'm really impressed with the image that's coming out of this camera. It's beautiful. It has great detail. The colors are awesome. Really, really happy with it. Now, this does do oversampled 4K up to 60 frames a second. So you get a 6K oversample in DCI and a 5.6K oversample in 4K. That's something that's different about this camera than the R5, for example, because that only does the 4K oversampled mode up to 30 frames a second. So 4K 60 in the R5 is line skipped. Now the R5C does, I believe, do a oversampled 4K 60, but that does not have the same autofocus system that is in the R5 or the R3. And speaking of autofocus, this camera is unreal in terms of the animal and animal eye autofocus and tracking. I think it's just incredible. And this, as I said, is a sports and wildlife fast shooting camera. And with that comes incredible speed in terms of autofocus and just the way the camera works. And I think I've realized very quickly that when I'm shooting wildlife videography, the faster you can react to things, the better, not just in terms of how you get shots, but how your camera operates, like how quick it is, and also the autofocus and all that kind of stuff. And that's a big part about this camera, so it's been really, really cool. I was really impressed with both of these lenses, and I have to say that, you know, the big thing, as I mentioned earlier, is the stabilization in the 100-500 with the IBIS in the R3 is super, super good. And the fact that I can now ditch a tripod makes shooting completely different. I don't have to set up the tripod, level it, and I'm kind of stuck in that spot. I can move around and be very nimble, and it's a lot more fun. This is not hard to hold up. The 200-600 from the Sony one is really heavy and really big, and it's hard to hold up. So that makes a huge difference. All right, so in terms of the physical part about this camera, if you haven't seen this camera before, it's sort of reminiscent of the 1DX style cameras. It's big, it's their pro body, it has the built-in big battery, and it's completely weather sealed. It has buttons all over it. Now, one thing I love is just how good this camera feels in your hands. I personally think Canon makes the best feeling cameras when you're holding them. This thing is next level. It feels unbelievable, and it's not as heavy as it looks. I think if you ever held like a 1DX, you know it's a pretty heavy camera. This is definitely bigger and heavier than like an R5 or R6, but it feels very well balanced, and it feels great in your hands. Like the grip and having a place to put your pinky is awesome. One other thing I want to point out is when you have a bigger camera like this and you're hand holding a big lens like the 100-500, having your full hand on the camera makes a huge difference. So buttons everywhere. It takes the same combo as the R5. It has the CF Express Type B and the SD card. Now, I don't mind the CF Express Type B because Angelbird makes a really inexpensive card. It's $180 for 512 gigabytes. I'll leave it linked down below. That's way cheaper than my SD cards because I've been shooting on the ProGrade V90 cards, and those are way more expensive for for less storage, and they're super fast and durable, so that's great. We have great ports on here. It's awesome. We also have this big battery, which is going to take some getting used to. I'm used to the smaller mirrorless style batteries, so that's really cool. Now onto the back. So many buttons. Really nice layout. One thing that's gonna take some getting used to is the power switch is kind of weird and it's in a different spot. But I think the biggest advantage, not only in the physical part of this camera, is the EVF is so big and so beautiful. And this makes my job so much easier. I usually don't use an EVF, but now that I'm doing wildlife, I've been using it more and more often. And this thing just physically is so big that when I look in, I can just see everything at once. It's great. Also, it has a flip out screen so you can film yourself, which is nice. And I really want to have one of these in every camera now. And I do really enjoy the LCD screens on the Canon cameras. They're fantastic. Now on the top of the camera, we have a bunch of other stuff going on. This screen can be a little bit handy sometimes. I usually don't use it, but I caught myself using it today. But overall, the camera feels great in your hands. I love using it. I can't wait to go out and shoot a bunch more stuff with it. And let me know if you have any questions down below. I think in general, my first impressions are this is an unbelievable hybrid camera, especially if you're doing photography, which I don't really do much of. I still think that if you're doing solely videography and you're not filming yourself very often, the C70 is definitely a better camera for all the things I've talked about so many times. But as my needs have changed and I'm doing content creation and wildlife stuff right now, this camera is pretty cool and I'm really excited to use it. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. And if you did enjoy it, please consider hitting subscribe down below. A lot more cool content coming up about lots of cool cameras, videography, content creation, all that kind of stuff. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.